From the water, Hashima Island does not look like an island at first. It looks like a ship that never leaves port, a wall of concrete, broken windows, sea defenses, and apartment towers packed so tightly together that the skyline earned the nickname Gunkanjima, Battleship Island. The legend says the island was abandoned overnight and left exactly as it was, a concrete ghost city where schools, baths, corridors, stairwells, and mine entrances kept the shape of human life after every human was gone. The fact is more precise, and more disturbing. Hashima was a coal mining settlement off Nagasaki, run for decades as an industrial machine. This episode is not treating the ruins as a haunted attraction. The rule is stricter: dates, places, official heritage records, tourism records, and survivor-centered controversy where the record demands it. Hashima can look like a movie set, but it was a workplace, a town, and for some people a place of coercion and suffering. Coal was found around the island before the modern mine became famous. By the late 19th century, undersea mining turned the rock into a strategic industrial site. Mitsubishi bought Hashima in 1890, and the island became part of the coal economy that helped fuel Japan's rapid industrial transformation. The physical shape of the island changed with the work. Seawalls, reclaimed land, mine shafts, concrete housing, schools, shops, communal facilities, and narrow paths turned a small offshore site into one of the densest built environments of its time. The island was engineered against typhoons, waves, and the pressure of too many people living above too much work. In 1916, reinforced concrete housing rose on Hashima at a time when such buildings were still unusual in Japan. More blocks followed. The buildings were not romantic ruins then. They were answers to industrial pressure. Workers needed to be near the mine, families needed rooms, and the company needed the island to function without daily dependence on the mainland. The myth version says Hashima was a cursed city. The fact version says it was an extremely concentrated company town. That does not make it less eerie. It makes it easier to understand why the abandoned buildings feel so severe. Every corridor was part of a system designed to keep labor, housing, school, food, entertainment, and extraction inside the same seawall. By 1960, tourism sources describe about 5,300 people living there at the height of mine production. That number is hard to picture until you remember the island's scale. Families lived above a coal mine, children went to school within sight of mine buildings, and the sea was not a view so much as a boundary. The island's nickname came from its silhouette. From a distance, the outer walls and blocky apartment towers looked like the profile of a warship. But the nickname can mislead. A battleship suggests command and motion. Hashima was more like a locked engine room, energy below, concrete above, and the ocean around everything. Life on the island had ordinary details. There were homes, a school, bathhouses, a hospital, shops, shrines, and entertainment. People cooked, studied, worked, argued, watched weather, and raised children. Any honest documentary has to hold that ordinary life beside the darker record, because ruins become too easy to consume when the people inside them disappear. The mine itself was not a picturesque ruin. It was undersea coal extraction, with heat, humidity, depth, danger, and industrial discipline. The romantic photograph of empty towers is the last page of a much longer story. The first pages are labor, fuel demand, company control, and the national importance of coal. Then comes the part that makes Hashima contested. During the wartime period, Koreans and others were brought to work at some of the industrial sites under harsh conditions. In the UNESCO context, this history became central to the debate over how the site should be interpreted and what visitors should be told. That wording matters. This episode is not using the island as a simple horror backdrop. It is saying that the forced labor history is part of the record and part of the dispute over memory. Survivor accounts and Korean government materials describe severe conditions and coercion. Japanese heritage materials have been criticized for not fully presenting that history. The myth version treats the island as empty because of a curse. The fact version says the emptiness came from energy economics. When coal declined and oil became dominant, the mine lost its reason to exist. In January 1974, Mitsubishi closed the mine. By April 1974, the residents had left. That is the real abandoned city moment, not a demon, not an experiment, not a secret evacuation. A company town lost its company purpose. The mine closed. The school, hospital, apartments, corridors, and rooftops no longer had a population to serve. The island went silent because the work that created it ended. For decades, the sea did what the sea does. Salt, storms, typhoons, rain, and time began pulling the buildings apart. Concrete cracked. Windows opened to weather. Staircases darkened. Rooftops filled with weeds. The same seawalls built to defend the settlement became the frame around a slow collapse. This is why Hashima photographs feel so powerful. They show a future that arrived too early: high-density housing with no residents, industrial optimism with no industry, schoolrooms with no children, and a skyline that still looks organized even while it decays. The fear is not that something supernatural happened there. The fear is that an entire world can become obsolete. In 2009, tours reopened to a limited part of the island. That detail is important because most visitors do not freely wander the ruins. Safety restrictions keep people to designated routes. Much of the island remains unstable, off-limits, and vulnerable. The tourist view is real, but partial. In 2015, Hashima became part of the UNESCO-listed sites of Japan's Meiji Industrial Revolution, a serial property of 23 component sites connected to iron and steel, shipbuilding, and coal mining. UNESCO frames the series around Japan's rapid industrialization as a non-Western country adopting and adapting industrial technology. But UNESCO also notes conservation challenges. Hashima coal mine is deteriorating. That is not just an architectural problem, it is a memory problem. What exactly should be preserved? The silhouette, the mine remains, the apartment blocks, the story of modern industry, the story of forced labor, or the warning that ruins can be edited into spectacle? The answer has to be all of it, or the island becomes dishonest. If we only tell the industrial success story, we hide the human cost. If we only tell the Ghost Island story, we turn workers and families into props. If we only tell the controversy, we miss how the place physically worked. Hashima demands a full history approach. Think about the city layout. There was no soft edge. The sea wall was the border. Inside it, buildings rose because there was nowhere else to go. Density was not an aesthetic choice. It was a consequence of mining under the sea from a small platform of land. The architecture records pressure. The apartments also record hierarchy. A company town does not distribute space randomly. Housing, amenities, and access often reveal rank, job, family status, and control. Even when details vary by period, the island's overall form reminds us that work shaped life from morning to night. For people who remember Hashima as home, the ruins can carry nostalgia: rooftop gardens, crowded stairways, school memories, festivals, shared baths, and the strange closeness of island life. For people connected to forced labor, the same concrete can mean confinement, danger, exploitation, and historical denial. The same place can hold conflicting memories without either memory becoming fake. That is why the phrase myth versus fact needs care here. The myth is not only ghosts. The myth can also be a clean heritage story with no suffering in it, or a ruin tour story with no workers in it, or a movie island story with no dates in it. The fact is messier and more valuable. The island's modern fame also came through popular culture. Its silhouette and ruin atmosphere made it useful for photographers, urban explorers, documentaries, and references to villain lairs. But a cinematic image can flatten a place. Hashima looks unreal, which is exactly why the real history needs to be spoken clearly. The coal under Hashima helped feed a national industrial system. That system produced infrastructure, ships, factories, and modern power. It also produced dangerous labor conditions and wartime coercion. The island is not a symbol with one meaning. It is a compact record of industrial ambition and human cost. A careful narrator should not claim that every room is haunted. There is no need. The ruins already ask better questions. What happens when a company builds a whole world for one resource? What happens to families when a workplace becomes a town? What happens to memory when heritage status arrives before every victim's story is fully accepted? By the time tourists returned, the island had already become an image: the battleship shape, the broken apartments, the seawall, the empty hospital, the forbidden residential blocks. But images cannot testify by themselves. They need context, or they invite the easiest story instead of the truest one. The easiest story says Hashima was abandoned because something impossible happened. The truest story says the island was built by industrial demand, crowded by labor, contested by memory, emptied by economic change, and preserved in fragments because the world cannot decide whether it is looking at achievement, warning, or wound. There is a reason the ruins feel post-apocalyptic. Hashima compresses the timeline of modernity. First, resource discovery. Then corporate acquisition. Then infrastructure, density, extraction, family life, wartime pressure, closure, abandonment, tourism, World Heritage status, and international argument. The island is a century of industrial history in one concrete shell. The ocean makes the story sharper. A mainland mining town can fade into roads and suburbs. Hashima cannot fade that way. It sits offshore, visibly separate, easy to photograph as an object. The sea turns the island into a display case, but also into a barrier. You can look at it and still not enter most of it. That distance creates temptation. From a boat, the island becomes a silhouette. From a thumbnail, it becomes a haunted city. From a tourist deck, it becomes a controlled ruin. But from the record, it becomes a working settlement where thousands of people lived under conditions shaped by coal, concrete, war, weather, and management. The respectful version of the story does not ask the viewer to choose between eerie beauty and dark history. It says the eerie beauty is part of the problem. Ruins can make suffering look cinematic. The more striking the photograph, the more careful the narration has to be. So what should we see when we look at Battleship Island after dark? Not a cursed ship. Not a simple monument. Not a clean industrial trophy. See a mine that became a city that became a ruin, and a ruin that became an argument about what history is allowed to include. The buildings are still there because concrete lasts longer than certainty. The seawall is still there because the ocean never stopped pressing against it. The controversy is still there because a place can be globally recognized and still not fully understood. Hashima's final lesson is not that people vanished overnight. It is that people can be removed from a story even when the buildings remain. A full history puts them back: miners, families, children, managers, forced laborers, survivors, tourists, preservationists, and critics, all inside the same frame. The myth says the island is haunted because it is empty. The fact says it is haunting because it is not empty at all. It is crowded with evidence: concrete, coal, seawalls, official records, survivor memory, disputed interpretation, and the silence left when a place built for extraction outlives the people it extracted from.